Hi, welcome to Abundance Masters. I'm your host, Genevieve Kahn of GenevieveKahn.com, and I'm an abundance creation guide. And if you don't know or you're not sure what abundance is, then this is definitely the series for you. And today I have with me Tarah Abram. Now, Tarah is a designer, photo stylist, meditation teacher, advocate for mindful living, and she's also an international best-selling author. Tarah, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
This is just so great that we've had a chance to sit down and talk about abundance specifically. We've fortunately known each other for a short time before that, where you were helping me with my Reclaim Your Health podcast that I host with my friend, Dr. Rachel Haviland. So it's really great to be on this forum as well. Now, Tarah, what would you consider to be your area of expertise when it relates to abundance?
I think with that, it kind of taps into, I guess, a little bit of that mindful living aspect in being in abundant in your daily life. I like to focus a lot on gratitude and what I do have, and I think the more energy you put into that, the more that grows and builds. If that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely does. And it's, part of the universal laws, one of which being the law of attraction. And the law of attraction basically simply states what you think about, you bring about. And, sometimes the law of attraction, I would say, requires a bit more than just thinking about something to bring it about. Wouldn't you say, Tarah, would you say that it's more than just thinking about abundance that makes it happen?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that there's definitely, everything starts off with that thought or that vision, and then I think you got to bring it into that physical realm, whether it's writing it down or setting a specific intention of what you're going to do to bring it into, maybe you're going to write it down for 5 days and let it go, something like that. But definitely, I think you have to put a little action behind it if you want it to come to fruition.
Absolutely. I think it's a combination of right thoughts and right actions. And sometimes it takes a while to figure out what those actions are. But it's not as complicated as I used to fear, when I was in my younger days, certainly. Now, did you initially have trouble creating abundance in your life?
Yes and no. I think I just over time became more intentional about it. I've always been a very positive person. I like to look at the glass half full, not half empty. It's just the vibration I like to stay in. But but now I've just become much more intentional about it, more intentional about, my desires, my wants, my goals, what I'm trying to achieve. So, then I kind of leave the in between, the how part, I kind of leave that part alone. I allow things to come to me and, my intuition to guide me. And it seems to work out quite well.
That's great. And I think it's so important what you mentioned about the leaving the how part alone. Very often when we are trying to create abundance, we want to know the how and we want to know it immediately because we've, learned to be an instant gratification kind of culture. So it's like, okay, well, I want this. I want it now. Here we go. And then very often it doesn't happen immediately. So I'm really very excited that you mentioned that about leaving the how alone. It seems as though there needs to be some kind of trust factor and just not worrying about it, which is also, it relates to the law. It's part of the whole law of creation, part of the law of abundance itself, just letting go and trusting that it will happen. Is that something that was hard for you at first to just, let it go and just not worry about it?
Yeah, it was because I'm very much a planner and I like to know what's happening. It's funny because I'm like that, but then I'm also very free flow and I kind of go with things and I can be very spontaneous. But when it comes to goals or things that I want to achieve, certainly it was like, okay, well, I need to strategize every little bit of how to do it. But I've learned that the less I put into it, I think the more avenues become open because you haven't started to kind of connect those neural pathways, I think, right, to say, okay, now I got to follow this path because that's what you've suggested. So I think it's having more clarity on the what, or the desire, versus the how it's going to happen. And then absolutely that trust, just knowing, and, really feeling like it's going to happen too, like bringing that kind of emotion into it as well. And then once you, I think, bring it into the physical world, like out of your mind, having that thought or the idea or the desire, and whether it's journaling or writing it down in a notebook or goal book or gratitude book, or whatever that might look like that to you, and then letting it go and just seeing where you're guided to flow and into. I think then for me anyways, it's just, things will come up and it's just like, okay, yes, that's in alignment with that. Now can you guide me in that direction, sort of thing.
That's so great that you mentioned that it's really part of a flow to step into. And it does take some practice. However, I think that as long as we are intentional, like you mentioned, setting the intention, and just trusting and going with the flow, which is not something that very often we're used to. I know I wasn't in the past. I mean, I had patience for nothing, and I still struggle with patience very often. So it's great that you talk about just going with that flow and just trusting. That's terrific.
Yeah, well, it was kind of like I don't want to say it was a trial and error thing, but what I noticed was when I did that, things started to fall into place. So it was kind of, at one point it was just kind of like, no, I'm just going to go with this because I feel like I have to. I don't know why. I can't explain it. And then suddenly, things start to fall in place and you move along, and then you're like, oh, wait a second here. Because I didn't hold on to it, like I was like, I'm just going to go for this. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But I really feel like it's going to, that kind of a feeling, I guess you get.
Yeah. So it's almost a combination of optimism, excitement, and perhaps patience.
Oh yeah. A lot of patience.
Yeah. That's something that it's really tricky for me personally to learn, but I find that the more that I practice these kinds of principles, the easier it gets. And actually, very often, the quicker my results.
Yeah.
It's almost never instantaneous, but so that the combination of those, I think, is just so incredibly important. Would you credit that with getting you where you are today, or are there other factors that got you where you are at this point?
I mean, it definitely has a lot to do with it. There's also that connection with yourself and in really being true to, what you want to do and what you desire to do and what your goals are. And I think initially for me, I might have thought my goals were one thing, and then I have quickly learned, well, I've now learned that wasn't, once maybe I got to that place, I was like, oh, well, I'm not there anymore where I thought I wanted to go. I've grown now. And so now I want to move into this place. So, and it was just, and again, it was a trusting. It was kind of probably to some outside friends and stuff at the time, they were like, what are you doing? You've just been working so hard to get to this and now you're going this way. And I'm like, well, yeah, it feels good to me now. So might not make any sense to you, but it makes perfect sense to me. And it was just like a real trust that I just knew it was a direction I wanted to go, or, something I wanted to achieve. And then the outcome presented itself.
That's amazing. It makes it sound almost magical, and I love that. It's trusting and doing what feels good, and that's fantastic. I have some other guests that are going to be coming on this series as well, and I know that that's their philosophy. And it's just so amazing to know that even if our trust muscle is not quite developed or strengthened yet, that we can learn to do that over time.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Wow, I love that. So the people that you serve with your business, How have you learned to help them?
Um, sorry, excuse me. I
No
think
problem.
it really, again, I think it's really sharing different practices such as like meditation and sorry, introducing tools like journaling and gratitude practice and things like that to help them gain clarity. And I think what your why is in life, like your big why, not just like, yeah, I'm a mom and that's my why, I'm here today and day, but the clearer I think that you can get on that, especially when it comes to business, because, my mentors have always and coach me in a way that it's, always service before sales, if that makes, you know what I mean? It's not about that. And that's true for me because I've always been the helper, the ear to listen to, that kind of a person. So, really kind of introducing those kinds of things because, it may sound so simple, but when you're not in this world and you're not used to doing those things, it's those simple little things that sometimes somebody needs to say, hey, try this. And you're like, oh, I've never even thought about doing that. It is so simple. So it's been those tools and things that I've started to share with others that have really been helpful because it allows them to get more clarity. And I think that big why is such a important one. I know it was for me, definitely. The clearer I got on that.
Absolutely. It's so great that you're able to help your clients with that because, especially when I think about being a mom, and you mentioned that, that to me, originally when I was attempting to have my own business, that's the only reason I could come up with as far as like my why. What was my big why?
Mhm.
My family. At the time, I was doing stuff that I absolutely hated to try to build a business. It was not the business model for me at all. And that was really the only reason I could come up with. And I found out that just saying I'm doing this for my family wasn't really enough for me. I needed a deeper reason. I needed a reason where, like you mentioned before, that you can go with what feels good. It had to resonate.
Yeah.
And I love too that you were talking about just being at that point where you're just able to help your clients with things like journaling and the other things that you mentioned. Those are such important tools that did you learn those on your own before, or did you learn those kind of at the same time that you were trying to develop your business?
Well, I've always had a million notebooks on the go. Now, I never knew why I had them on the go or what I was really doing, and I wasn't really intentional about it at the time. Um, so, I mean, I did actually, I did learn to do that more so, even though I was kind of already doing it unknowingly. It was brought to my attention that it would be beneficial. So now I've, certainly just put much more intention behind it. And have made it up, something that I do on a regular basis now. But yeah, in the beginning, it was, definitely I did it, but I didn't know why I was doing it. I'm the nutso with like 50,000 journals all over the place and drawings and stuff like that. But I'm a creative, so I have to get my thoughts out. Otherwise, my mind keeps spinning. And at least then I know that they're there and I can come back to them. So it's it's the simplest thing, but it's a really great tool.
Yeah, journaling is so important. It really is. And I have tons of journals as well. Not so much ones that I haven't written in yet, but I've been journaling since I was 11. So I've literally got, decades of journals. And I think it's a really important thing to be able to do that too. And there are different kinds of journals you can get. There are different reasons to journal. There are success journals. There are gratitude journals. There are just, I need to get my thoughts out kind of journals, those kind of things. And I'm always going back and forth between the three. Sometimes I just go to my one generic journal and anything that I want to think about, write about, I just go to that. Do you encourage your clients to have separate journals for separate subjects? For example, we're talking about abundance here and how we can create abundance. Do you advise your clients to do anything like that, kind of segment like that?
Yeah, I do, because I'm like that myself. I'll have my journal about things that I'm writing about. But then if I have like, my desire journal and my goals and the things that I want to create, and if I'm writing down, something that I do want to manifest, because I feel like that energy needs to be in the same place. And if it comes to, when it comes time to, I like to work with the moon cycles. So when it comes time to like releasing things, I like that to be in a separate place. I don't like to mix the two together, like the energies together kind of thing. So yeah, definitely I encourage that. That's probably why I have so many different ones. And then one of my mentors taught me to get the good old fashioned parking lot booklet, where it's just when you've got an idea to just write it all down so you can come back to it. But it is really cool. Like, it wasn't that long ago. I pulled out some from maybe a year ago, and I was like, oh yeah, all this stuff that, like, right. I'm so happy I wrote that all down now to be able to come back to. So, but yeah, I definitely think segmenting and keeping the energy consistent within your journal also makes a big difference. I think it just makes it more powerful, if that makes sense, or more magical in a way. I like the word magical, so.
I think it does. I think it makes it, because it's actually kind of like a more lasered kind of magic. It's more intentional. You mentioned before about being intentional. And what I love too is the mention that you had of moon cycles. I'm still getting used to that kind of thing myself. How can we use the cycles of the moon to create abundance in our lives?
Well, it's like, it's like they say, like the moon moves tides, right? And we are made up of 75% water. So it makes a lot of sense that it can affect us energetically. And I've noticed a lot in circles that I roll with, like in females, they tend to have their cycles, it might be on new moon, it might be on full moon. So, and it's very consistent. So for the new moon, that's where I like to plant my seeds and set my intentions. And then
You just had a new moon. That's great.
Yeah. So I definitely like to use those. And then once it comes time, to full moon, it's more where, you want those seeds to start to grow. And so, yeah. And I like to get out in nature, and actually, if it's not winter here and it's not right now, I like to take my journaling outside during those times. And especially if you want to talk about abundance, that's a great time to do it under that wonderful energy. And grounding too with the earth. I find that, it's just that connection. It's just an energy. You feel it, you start to feel more in flow, and yeah, it's just kind of fun.
That's awesome. I was just muting the microphone while you were talking, just to make sure that, my audio, there wasn't too much background noise on my end. And then I went over with my mouse to turn the mic back on, and it just wouldn't turn back on. So, so it's like you're saying, got to go with the flow, right?
Yeah.
So it's the whole astrology thing really fascinates me. And just to just touch on one more point about the moon. There are some people that are kind of fearful of things like a full moon. I see it more as bringing things to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think of it that way. When there's a full moon, is there a different way for us to bring in more abundance than, let's say, if there is a full moon, or say we have a waxing crescent, or, whatever other moon phase?
Well, with full moon, yeah, like once like you said, it's what you want to bring to fruition. And once you go past, like, I think it's like 3 days leading up to the full moon, and then the 3 days after, but it's the 3 days after when I like to do the releasing. I don't like to do that at the time when the moon is the highest. So I like to, take my new moon intentions and seeds that I've planted and take them into that light of that full moon. And then once I get there, then it's kind of going back to releasing what I don't need anymore. That's going to, I guess, allow me to kind of manifest those goals, kind of thing. And those desires are bringing that abundance that I'm looking for. And I know a lot of people find it kind of like, ooh, it's eerie and stuff like that. But I'm like, the sky's been the sky for how many years, right? And it's been studied like that. And I find this, I've been dabbling in astrology probably since I was, I don't know, 6 or 7, something like that. I've just always found it really fascinating. just to look up the sky. And so, and, learning about how the other planets can affect you and things like that too. It's just really interesting. And again, it's always been there. So it makes sense to me that it's relevant. One of my mentors, when I went to meditation school, she's like, it's happening anyways, whether you believe it or not. So you can choose to tap in and use the energy or not. So I always liked that one.
That's a great point. It reminds me of the universal laws. They exist whether we believe in them or not. Mm-hmm. So might as well work with the energies that are around us rather than denying that they exist. For me, I tend to get a little too much in my head. And when I do things like, somebody might consider frou-frou or something like that, like astrology or energy healing or any of that, I find that it really brings me more into my heart. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm in my own head, my head is a neighborhood I should not be in by myself. Not a good idea. So I'm hoping that our viewers will get something out of what you're talking about, of doing other things. Not to say that, anybody has to, of course, anybody's willing to believe or is free to believe, of course, anything they want. They don't need us to tell them that. But I think it's really important that we can talk about these other things that work for us, because life can be so magical mm-hmm. if we have different ways of working with the universe and working with energy and working with abundance.
Yeah, definitely. When you're right, it's easy to, Michael Singer wrote a really good book, Untethered Soul, where they get into talking about, when you are up in your head and the conversations that you have in your head, and, you're really the observer of those conversations. So you can choose to have what conversation you want to have. And so it is true, because you can get stuck up there and you can go, oh, this sounds weird, or this is strange, or that's different, or I don't, and like you said, just kind of going within the heart and that trusting yourself, and that knowing that, yeah, this is something that feels good and it feels in alignment with me. So I should just trust with it and go it and not listen to what I'm telling myself. I can give myself a million reasons, like, oh, this is a red flag, or oh, that's a scam, and or something like that, and then you have to sit back and go, okay, what does it really feel like to me, and then make a decision based on there. And everybody's different. Everything's going to resonate differently with people. Some might feel into it and enjoy it, and others might be like, that's not for me. So, it's different for everyone. But for myself, I've found it to be beneficial, and I just find it fascinating. I like how it all works.
It really is fascinating. And the more I learn, the more interested I become about the different ways that we can bring abundance into our lives. And yes, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. I have heard about it so many times over the years, and I have not read it yet. So I was just writing it down, taking some notes, because I've got to get that book.
It's a really good one.
Yeah, it seems like a great book. So yay, I'm looking forward to reading that. So thank you for bringing that up. So also, Tarah, what is it that you do every day, like a daily practice, daily routine, to maintain or even increase the abundance that you have in your life?
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, connecting in nature is very important every single day. I like to start off my mornings, ideally with a walk, and then I like to do some meditation and some journaling. So those are pretty consistent in my life. And it's a little harder here in Canada in the winter, when sometimes I can't get out. It frustrates me very much, because I find it very centering and very grounding, and allows me to flow through my day just more gracefully. I can't explain it, but I just notice when I don't do it, it's just not the same. So that's one thing I definitely try to be consistent about. And then to the meditation and the journaling. And some days it looks a little bit differently. Sometimes your schedule changes as a mom. So maybe I only have 10 minutes one day, or, sometimes I'll have a half an hour, 45 minutes. Maybe it's only 5 minutes. Just kind of what, I'd like to, ideally I like to get a good 20 minutes in, but it just depends. But at least I am consistent about doing it.
That's great. I can definitely also relate about winter. I live in the Boston area. I don't think we have quite as long of a winter as you do up in Canada, but yeah, it can be very long, and it's hard to get outside when it's a blizzard, or when it's like 2 degrees Fahrenheit out. So I can totally relate to that. So Tarah, what would you say is the number one thing that you'd like our viewers to know about creating abundance out of all the things we were talking about here, or if there's anything else?
I think just really just to be kind with yourself and understand that especially if you're new to it, that it's a process, and that, it's interesting because you can get into a room and we can talk about these kinds of things with, people that are familiar with it, and someone else might be like, I have no idea what you're even saying or what this all means. So I think really just being gentle with yourself and know that it's, I think, your own experience, and I think you have to find what really resonates for you and what works for you, because yeah, like you said, the word resonate before, it just, what works for me might not work for you necessarily, or somebody else. So it's kind of really trying things too. And that's, I guess, the biggest thing, being open to at least trying and seeing if you like it or you don't. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important. It's almost like an experimentation period, finding what works and what doesn't. And I think it's about being, or maybe even creating, flow for abundance to flow into our lives. So I really love that. That really resonates with me. I totally get that. So Tarah, are there any final thoughts that you have right now as we're starting to come to a close?
I guess the only other thought I have is, or maybe just to mention again about the gratitude. I think it's a really cool tool to use, and starting a gratitude journal and writing down 1 or say 3 things a day that you're grateful for, and each day trying to pick something different, and eventually you've got 100, 200, 300 different things that you can go back and look through, and it can be just something simple like, I'm grateful, as I met a new stranger today and they gave me just this amazing smile and a compliment, or something like that. It can be even just something like that. Or but when you start to kind of put that into practice, you will really notice a difference, because we can get stuck, I think, sometimes in life in frustration, like, you're stagnant and things aren't moving forward, and you're like, I want this to happen and it's not happening. And I think that the gratitude practice is a really valuable tool, because it reminds you constantly that you are grateful, and that you have many things to be grateful, and it is abundant in front of you, kind of thing. So, and I think more abundance creates more abundance, sense, right?
It absolutely does. I like to liken it to a snowball. You start off just a few, snowflakes on the ground. They're sticking together, and it grows and grows and grows. Same thing, And I just think it's such a powerful thing that you mentioned about, it really does, like attracts like. So it's such a powerful thing and such a great thing for us to be able to do. So I absolutely love that. Tarah, how can people get in touch with you? If you like to mention your website, if you have a free gift for our viewers, anything like that, everything that you mentioned is totally cool.
Yep, you can reach me at my website, juicylivingbydesign.com. I do have a meditation on there, a free download. It's a little 10-minute mini vacay, so you can take a little time out to the beach, and that's available there on the homepage if you want to give it a try.
Oh, that is fabulous. Absolutely love that. Thank you so much, Tarah Abram, for being with us today. And we are so excited that you were able to join us. And I look forward to staying in touch with you and seeing how else we can work together. That'd be awesome. So
thank you
very much. Oh, I'm sorry, what was that last thing you said?
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
And yeah, looking forward to continuing this Abundance Master series. So thanks so much for tuning in.